All right, so let's talk about the short run versus the long run. These have specific definitions, but they're kind of unspecific. And let me tell you what I mean. In the short run, there's at least one factor which is fixed, it can't be altered. So, for example, plant capacity, or suppose you have a farm. In the long run, you can change your farm size, or you can sell the farm and move to the city. But in the short run, you've purchased your farm. And so in the short run, the decision is what to grow on the farm, how much to grow, how to grow it, what inputs to use, right? So the decision in the short run is a quantity decision. You could produce quantity equals zero. You could produce positive quantities. And then in the long run, again, we will have this decision to enter or exit the market or to change your plant size or capacity, buy another plot of land to do additional farming on. All right, so again, one more time, the short run, we have at least one fixed cost. So if there's any fixed cost, we must be in the short run. In the long run, you can enter or exit the market. So in the short run, the decision is what quantity to produce and the related decisions of how to produce that quantity. In the long run, the decision is whether or not to be in the market at all, whether or not you want to be a farmer or sell your farm and move somewhere else. All right, we have talked a little bit about defining our costs, but I want to just kind of reiterate it because it's important. A marginal product or a marginal cost, a marginal anything is just asking if we do one more, what will happen? So, for example, the marginal product of labor is if we hire one more worker, how much additional output will we get? The marginal cost, it's not listed on this screen, but anything marginal was one additional. So a marginal cost was if we produce one more unit, how much additional does it cost us? The average, any average, is we're just dividing by the quantity. So if we have a total output with a certain number of labor input, we just divide our total quantity divided by our number of workers, we get the average product of labor. All right, so once again, it's not really a short versus long run thing, but really wanted to reiterate what is a marginal versus an average. Really important to understand those definitions and the distinction moving forward. All right, again, we assume diminishing returns to labor. So if too many workers are hired, they'll get in each other's way and be less productive. This is basically what's going on here. As you produce more workers, you hire more workers, you might produce more stuff to a point, but then eventually at some point, you will become less productive. The workers will get in each other's way, have less to not have enough to do, stuff like that. Again, I'm not going to stress too much the shapes of these curves and deriving this for the purpose of this class. If you were to move on to an intermediate class, this would become more important. So if you're an econ major or you anticipate taking the intermediate class, you want more information, feel free to reach out. So again, in the short run, we have fixed costs. In the long run, fixed costs are zero. You can change your farm size. You can buy, additional land or sell or so on. In the short run, you cannot do that. So we have fixed costs that have already been paid. And then we have our variable costs, which increase as we produce more stuff. That gives us our total costs. All right. I made a video separately on the calculation. So a little bit more on the cost curves in the short run. Again, we have this U shape of ABC and ATC. This is a result of this assumption of marginal cost. Again, I'm not really going to test on this, but we assume that due to diminishing product of labor, for a little while, marginal cost, the cost of producing one additional unit could be decreasing, but eventually it will be increasing. And so as a result, eventually these cost curves will be U-shaped. Doesn't have to be at this specific quantity. It could depend on the market, but the general shape of this is assumed to be true. and it's going to be assumed for all types of markets moving forward. And so, again, as we talk about different types of markets, perfectly competitive, monopolies, and so on, in the next units, we'll be assuming that this is the cost structure in the short run. In the long run, once again, all inputs can be adjusted, so there's no fixed cost. Firms can choose their plant size, and then each plant size or each production technique is associated with long run cost structure. And so all this graph is showing is that in the long run, you have the choice between different plants or say different farms or farm sizes, if we want to keep with the farm example. And the idea in the long run is going to be to produce at the lowest long run average total cost here. So basically the producer assesses all of the possibilities, chooses to produce at the lowest cost in an effort to try to maximize profit. All right, again, the shapes of these curves and these details about the models are not too important for my test questions, especially compared to just understanding what those costs are and based on some information being able to calculate these different types of costs. But we do run into a couple of definitions at the end of this chapter. Economies of scale just means what happens when you produce a higher quantity. Does the average cost go up or down? So for example, when we move to this point, Q0 to Q1, the average total cost, if we change our production method, can go down. That would be economies of scale. However, if we kept producing more and more all the way out here to Q2, the average cost of that is getting higher again. And so here we would have an area of diseconomies of scale where it becomes more expensive to produce higher quantities. Likewise, we could have an example, economies of scope. I think it's in here. Economies of scope just means instead of producing a higher quantity, if we produce more different products, what does that do to average total cost? So we find that some producers produce this whole wide range of products. Why is it? Well, they found that given the production techniques, once you start producing one or two of these products, it becomes fairly efficient to produce some of the other ones as well. So economies of scope refers to how does average cost change if a producer produces more different types of products. Okay, so again, I know that this chapter has a lot of definitions thrown at you. If you need some additional help, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you can check the quiz and homework video for some getting started on this week's quiz and homework questions.